What is up, guys? Media Review Mike here. So it's been a minute, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a hot minute, but I am back, finally, and I'm going to continue to beat the dead horse that are creepypasta readings. I can't really express how much I really enjoyed the Dead Plants videos, because I'm the kind of person who really gets into very niche sort of things, and I really enjoy watching other people talk about niche things that I'm interested in. So that was sort of the first time I could talk about something that I was unreasonably passionate about, and, you know, make it into a video. Also, quick side note, I do have the fan on next to me. You can probably hear it, and I have the fan on for two reasons. The first reason is I really passionately hate having good audio quality, and so I have done my darndest to make sure that this audio is just really unpleasant to listen to. And the second reason is that it's like 20-something degrees, and I can't not wear my navy jacket. I mean, this is a staple of the Media Review Mike channel, but also I don't want to be sweating profusely while I am reading. I wouldn't want anybody to mistake that for unbridled fear. Anyway, so today we're going to be reading the first request I've ever had for a video. This comes from a lovely individual known as the Man of Awesomeness. And he commented, "I love these videos, comedy review videos, and feel you are very underrated. A classic creepypasta story I would like to see you review is STUBB'S Clubhouse." Now, as a person who does not come from the creepypasta community, but who is quite familiar with creepypastas, I can't say that I've heard of this one. I pulled it up. It's clearly its own thing. It doesn't look like it's another Dead Plants, where it's a very clean creepypasta. This one looks like it'll probably be a bit more edgy. So viewer discretion, but I have not read it yet, and for all I know, it will be too inappropriate for me to read on the channel, because we run a clean ship here. So, enough dilly-dallying. Let's get into the story, shall we? I also could pull up a video, but that's no fun. So, you know, without Neon Plant Chris's beautiful voice narrating it, I mean, what's the point, really? So I'll just read it myself. And that also means I can go at my own pace. So, STUBB'S Clubhouse. Can't see an author for looking, that's fine. So let's jump into it. I had an awesome childhood, like most kids growing up in the 90s. Oh, he's a 90s kid, ladies and gentlemen. My TV schedule consisted mostly of SpongeBob, Power Rangers, and Transformers. For the most part, I wasn't really into kiddie shows like Barney or Mr. Rogers. Okay, Mr. Rogers is based. Do not diss Mr. Rogers. I've never watched the show. I just know, well, not never watched the show. I've seen bits. I've seen enough of the show to know that Mr. Rogers is an absolute hood classic. But the other day I was talking with my mum about when I was a little kid. At one point during the conversation, she brought up the topic of an old TV show I sometimes watched. It was called STUBB'S Clubhouse, which, ladies and gentlemen, is the title of this story. So, you know, it's probably going to center around this. I was unaware of the show she was referring to at first, but then the memories came flying back. I remembered it so clearly, almost instantly. Basically, STUBB'S Clubhouse was a cheesy, low-budget kids show starring a clown named Stubb. He had a rainbow-colored jacket, a hat, and if my memory serves, he wore black pants with stars on them. The show was kind of a rip-off of Pee-wee's Playhouse. Even as a kid, I could tell that. You know, I feel like it's a bit lazy to sort of go, oh, I remembered it instantly. But I suppose for the purpose of the story, that is how it has to be the case. My eyes, rather, do draw to the thing that says rare image of the show. It looks like he's wearing Converse clown shoes. That is a pretty well put together image for a creepypasta, assuming it's original. It could very well have just been ripped off the internet. But if that is an original image, it looks like they actually tried, which is not something I can say for the iconic Jeff the Killer image. I've never used Photoshop, and I could do a better job than that. You know, I mean, I could be nitpicky and say, well, if it's rare, why isn't it more low quality? But I do actually respect that they didn't go for the route where they just make it needlessly low quality, because that is a bit of a tired trope. Basically, Stubb lived in a big clubhouse, which strangely enough looked just like a normal house. Is that strange? I mean, what's the definition of a clubhouse at the end of the day? But, like, is it really that out there? I don't know. Which strangely enough looked like just a normal house. I assume that was due to their low budget. Stubb had a group of friends who lived in the clubhouse. I don't remember much, but I vaguely remember a poodle and a man in a really badly made elephant costume. Like I said, I don't remember much about the show. I didn't watch it very much, mainly for two reasons. One, it aired at a very strange and late time, around 10:30, which is bizarre for a kids' show. Trope number one. As far as I can tell, that's kind of pulled from 1999, which is an actually pretty good creepypasta, if you ask me. I don't know how tired of a trope this can really be considered, but I know that whenever I've read stories about, you know, obscure old children's media, they always say that it aired at a late time, you know, it's pretty overdone. But I'll continue, I'll try to give this story the benefit of the doubt, because I do genuinely hope it's good. From the perspective of someone who enjoys the craft of writing, but from the perspective of someone who wants an entertaining video, the story being good is a lot less interesting than if it was complete dog crap. 2, it only aired on a really obscure channel called Channel Bebo, which only aired shows for about 3 years. Then the channel was shut down for unknown reasons. Ooh, and interesting. Both of these are kind of very, very true. I just, my mind casts back to 1999, you know? The story, not the year. It is just very, well, I don't remember things about it, because it aired late, and, you know, it was on an obscure channel. Well, that's convenient. But there's no explanation as to why it aired so late, you know? It's just sort of, well, it was. Which doesn't not make sense, but it doesn't make sense either, which in itself, that sentence didn't make sense, so I don't know. Look, we'll just continue. In around November of 2006, I just turned 14. This was a few days after the conversation with my mum. I decided to treat myself to a little trip to half-price books. See, I like half-price books more than Barnes & Noble's, because you can find older books and movies, as opposed to the up-to-date stuff at Barnes & Noble's. I'm a bit of a hipster, okay? I like reading older books and movies. I don't like the new stuff. Bit cringe, but appropriate for a 14-year-old. In 2006, I guess. I feel like if he was a 14-year-old in 2006, he should just be, I don't know, listening to Evanescence. I was browsing through the videotape, searching for a tape of, oh, okay, I know, I can see where this is going. Searching for a tape of one of my favorite shows, Street Sharks, a show about anthropomorphic sharks that fought crime. I don't think those brackets are necessary. You could have just used commas. I was going through the tapes in alphabetical order, and I just reached the S section when something caught my eye. It was a tape labeled Stubb's Clubhouse. The case had no logo or picture to indicate it was Stubb. It was just a plain, bland case that had a piece of tape on the side that says Stubb's Clubhouse, written on it in black Sharpie. The tropes are palpable. So far, this is competently written. It's not bad yet. Could be bad. But it's definitely not very original. Man of Awesomeness referred to this as a classic. So, for all I know, I could be looking at this story that was an innovation for its time and be criticizing it by the standards of these tropes being overused. If I was smart, I would Google when this story came out. From my seconds of Googling, the oldest thing I can find is a video reading it from 2014 from Mr. Creepypasta. So it was probably written around somewhere between 2010 to 2014, meaning that these tropes would have been done by now. So there's no excuse. I was kind of curious about this show that I'd barely remembered, and plus I couldn't find Street Shark, so I decided to buy Stubb. It was pretty cheap, even for a half-price book tape, being only 75 cents. But hey, it was a bargain. I took it to the checkout corner. The woman working there looked at the tape and then stared at me. She timidly asked, "Are you sure?" Oh my goodness. "Are you sure you want to buy this tape?" It's such a trope. Like, dude, why would they be... Okay, first of all, why are they selling it if they're that scared? Second of all, if you're scared of it, why aren't you trying to just get rid of it? I hate this trope so much. I freaking hate this trope a lot. I politely said yes, and she rang it up. I went home, got out my VCR, and hooked it up to the TV. The living room, where, hooked it up to the TV in the living room where my 6-year-old sister Emily was playing with Barbies. She asked me what I was doing, and I told her that I had gotten a tape at half-price books that we could watch together. I put the tape in, and the standard copyright infringement warning message came up as usual. And, you know, since they've referred to something being as usual, it's about to go talk about all the things that weren't usual about it. I feel that in my heart of hearts, that some strange things are about to happen. The tape started at the theme song of the first episode, completed with xylophone music and sleepy singer. Okay. The episode started out in the clubhouse where Stubb introduced himself and told the viewers that we were going on a field trip. And told the viewers that, quotation marks, we were going on a field trip, end quotation marks. Otherwise, it should have said that they were going on a field trip. So that's the first grammatical error that I've noticed. There was a very bad rough cut to a playground in the middle of a grassy park. There was a group of small children about as old as my sister playing on a merry-go-round. Stubb walked up to them and they all ran to give him hugs. After that, Stubb looked at the camera and asked if the kids at home would like to play too. As assumed, Emily piped up yes, and Stubb replied, "Righty-o, and come on down to the playground and play with me." Emily asked me if she could go to the playground with Stubb, but I told her that this was filmed. However, I saw something interesting out of the corner of my eye. Ooh. We have a playground in the neighborhood, about a block from our house, but close enough that we can see it from the living room window. That's mighty convenient. It took me a second to make the connection, but it hit me that the playground in the video was the same as the playground in our neighborhood. And it hit me even more. The same children in the show were playing in our playground right now. They were wearing the same clothes as they were in the video, and they were performing the exact same actions, almost as if the video were being filmed live! Exclamation mark. Yeah, the font that... Either I need glasses or the font they use is really bad. Not their fault, just, you know, the Creepypasta Wiki's fault. Then I noticed something that disturbed me greatly. Thank you for telling us how you felt, author. I really love it when people tell me how to feel. In the video, one of the children was holding Stubb's hand, and when I looked out the window, the same child was making a motion like he was holding someone else's hand. But what? That same child was making a motion like he was holding someone's hand, but there was no one there. I was shocked. I immediately ejected the tape, much to Emily's sadness, as she was beginning to grow fond of the show. I took the tape out and threw it in the garbage. Thought I was done with Stubb, but I was wrong. Okay, a lot to unpack there. The story is starting to devolve, if you ask me. So, the child was holding the hand of somebody that wasn't there. That was poorly worded. I was shocked. I immediately ejected the tape, much to Emily's sadness. Could have tried pausing it. If I were in that position, I would have paused it. I would have tried pausing it. I think that would have been an interesting way to take the story. And of course, it doesn't need to be exactly real to life as to what happened. But, you know, while not everybody would have necessarily thought to have done that, it would have been interesting if the writer had his character think to do that, so that they could explore what would have happened, hypothetically. Much to Emily's sadness, as she was beginning to grow fond of the show, I took the tape and threw it in the garbage. I thought I was done with Stubb, but I was wrong. Why? I can understand... And that's another thing, that throwing it in the garbage and then not being done with it. I remember seeing that in, like, shows I watched when I was little. And it's even more prevalent in creepypastas. I've not been able to escape the trope, and the trope has always bothered me. Because you're, like, throwing away evidence of a sort of paranormal, I guess? Of something paranormal, rather. Anyway, and he thought he was done with Stubb, but he was wrong. The next day, when my mum picked Emily up from kindergarten, Emily told me that Stubb had been following their car driving in a black van. She said that she had looked out the black window and saw Stubb behind the wheel of a van. She told me that she had told Mum, but Mum didn't see any cars or vans whatsoever in her rearview mirror. Emily told me that she was confused and somewhat worried. I told her not to worry and to try and relax and let an adult handle the situation. That night, I went against my best judgment, and decided to fish the tape out of the trash and watch episode 2. The theme song started, but something was wrong. The xylophone was very distorted, and the woman's voice was a lot deeper and a bit messed up as well. The title came up again, and the colours were more dull, being composed of shades of brown and grey, rather than the usual bright red and yellow. I decided to brush it off as messed up tape and continued watch. Okay, to be fair, that does make a bit more sense, because VHS tapes can, do that. Maybe not that exactly, but they can have issues of similar nature. But it's still a tired trope. Like, I feel... Replace Stubb's Clubhouse with, Squidward's suicide, and this would basically be the exact same story so far, If you strip away the specific sort of, the van thing, or the being an intern at Nickelodeon, from a formula perspective, this is the exact same story, and I'm pretty sure that Red Mist or Squidward Suicide, or whichever came first, I don't know, and I don't really care. I'm pretty sure that came out in the late 2000s, and this came out in the early 2010s, as far as I can tell. It roughly cut to a still image of Stubb staring at the camera. After a while, I realized that it wasn't a still image. It was a video of Stubb sitting motionless and staring directly at the viewer. Stubb would periodically turn his head as if cracking his stiff neck, and would never blink. He did this the entire episode, which lasted around 20 minutes, and I sat there for all 20 of those minutes. But right before the episode ended, Stubb closed his eyes tightly while still staring, and then opened them to reveal pitch black eyes, nothing but inky blackness within his sockets. Suddenly the tape cut to a picture of a house. My house. I frantically ejected the tape once more and stuck it in the drawer. I looked out the window at where the cameraman would have been. There was neither anyone nor a trace of anyone anywhere. So yeah, really leaning into the tropes here, the inky black eyes. This is formulaic. It just feels like any creepypasta with a haunted, or not haunted, but an evil kids show vibe to it. And I'm not going to claim that, I've already compared it to 1999, I'm not going to claim that 1999 invented that idea, but it does it more intelligently than something like Red Mist or this. Or, I think that the trope can more be linked back to Candle Cove, but the reason that works is because it's not a story as much as it is a fictional forum post of people acting like actual people, and the horror isn't, the bone gnasher or the flesh gnasher, I can't remember its name. It's been a while since I've read the story. It had black inky eyes with a red pupil in them. It's, the show was off-putting, and then it turns out that the show never actually existed. And all of these people just unanimously had the exact same recollection of something that didn't exist. And that's the creepy bit. And it doesn't need to say that this is the creepy bit to get that creepy bit across. Yeah. So this is kind of just like Baby's first Candle Cove so far. I tried to get to sleep that night, but I just couldn't. I ended up sneaking downstairs in the middle of the night and sitting in the kitchen all night, with the light on and a huge supply of caffeinated drinks. The morning soon came, and I was safe for a while. Unexpectedly, the rest of the day went off with no strange occurrences. Emily didn't see Stubb following them in this van, which was an enormous relief, and a bit of a hope that this might be over. But that night, I woke up in what could be described as a conscious sleepwalking, meaning I got up in the middle of the night and did something while being fully conscious and aware, but still drawn to do the thing by some urge. What you have just described, dear author, is called, actions. When you consciously do something and you have a motivation behind it, that is called doing something. I subconsciously took the tape from the drawer and placed it back into the VCR. So you're conscious you consciously, subconsciously did something. That's an oxymoron, big guy. I sat down on the couch and suddenly awoke from my sleep. I noticed I was on the couch, about to watch the tape. I wanted to take the tape out and go back upstairs, but a strange urge or force told me I needed to watch the final episode, episode 3. The xylophone had been replaced with a loud banging, and the voice had become a deep, demonic-sounding voice, singing lyrics in a language I couldn't understand. The title came up, and the title card looked like it had been slashed by the claws of a large animal. When the episode turned on, Stubb was sitting at a table with some children. He asked the children if they wanted to play a game. Okay. Who is this, Jigsaw? And they eagerly said yes. Stubb reached under the table and revealed a large carving knife. Okay, we might have some skipping to do, ladies and gentlemen. He asked one of the children to place her arm on the table. A small girl did, and Stubb asked, "Tell me how it feels." He began to slowly, slice a thin layer of the flesh from the girl's arm, like he was peeling a potato. Blood immediately began to flow. The room was filled with the sounds of the girl's screams. Don't we love it? When instead of writing actual horror, you just write really disgusting things that make people uncomfortable to mask how lazy of a story writer you actually are. I actually hate people that do this. You see it all the time in creepypastas. You just take really, abhorrent things, this, and then you just, instead of writing something actually scary, you just go, look at this disgusting thing that's happening. That's not how you write horror, okay? I've never written a horror story, okay? And I don't think I have any, particularly scary ideas for horror stories, quite frankly. But the reason, H.P. Lovecraft, his work isn't just, there was a scary clown. Also, scary clown. That's the best you could think of for a kids show that's gone scary. Of course the creepy kids show clown is gonna be a murderer, okay? But H.P. Lovecraft, or Stephen King, his isn't just, a child was killed, and it was evil. They have actual meat to their stories. They have a backbone. They have a spine, and they don't just rely on really disgusting things that happen to people in the real world, like their children being murdered, and use it as a crutch for their bad storytelling capabilities. He asked the girl, does it feel happy? And he continued to slice a layer from the girl's arm until he hit the bone. The girl was... And I was still watching it at this point. I didn't immediately take it out and call the police. Okay, I'm guessing now, I'm gonna make a prediction that his sister is gonna be in this video, or she is the girl who's having this done to her. The girl was wailing like a banshee at this point, and I was in absolute shock. I felt like I would violently throw up at any moment. The girl's arm was drenched in blood, which had spilled onto the table and created a puddle on the tabletop. Stubbs started laughing in a happy, clown-like way, and the video ended. However, it then cut to another video. It was a video of Emily's room. Do you see how easily I predicted that? Right now, she was sound asleep, standing over her bed and looking down at her was Stubbs. Suddenly, he lifted the camera out with the inky black eyes in his sockets. Wow. That was bad. That was actually really terrible. I think that it's telling that the two recommended stories after this are Squidward's Suicide and Dead Bart. Russian Sleep Experiment, The Backrooms, Ben Drowned, probably fine. I haven't read I haven't read any of them, actually. I know of the Russian Sleep Experiment, and I know of Ben Drowned, and I know that The Backrooms is a meme. I didn't actually know that it was based off a creepypasta. I might read them. But this story was pretty terrible. It starts off relatively okay, just a generic, tropey, creepypasta. And then it just, out of nowhere, just becomes ridiculously over the top. And it wasn't as violent as something like Squidward's Suicide, with the gratuitous descriptions of child corpses. This one is still pretty frickin' disgusting, but I didn't have to stop reading it out loud, because the video would probably be, I don't have an issue reading this on the channel, for example. Whereas I would be less inclined to read something like Clockwork or Squidward Suicide out loud, because, you know, their descriptions of these violent actions are just really disgusting. And I don't think it's necessary to give these authors who use violence and gore as a crutch to compensate for their terrible lack of creativity, and I don't want to give them the time of day by validating it by actually reading what they've written. And I think that this story, while it's not as bad, it's still a symptom of this issue, in that it's just people who are really lazy writers, and instead of improving their work, they just describe gross things. Sometimes it's sexual assault, sometimes it's murder, sometimes it's kidnapping, but these are all horrible things that happen in the real world, and they just use them because they don't have any actual creativity to them. They don't know how to write an actual scary story, so they have to use things that make you feel sick in the pit of your stomach to make you think that you're scared of what the author's written, when in reality, you could just describe a car crash and get the exact same reaction.
What is up, guys? Different shirt media review Mike here. So I was in the editing process and I was sort of going over the footage that I had recorded of the original review that I filmed a couple of days ago, and I noticed a couple of issues that I didn't point out in the original recording that I feel that I should point out now. So the first issue that I've sort of noticed is that the protagonist is telling the story in the past tense, which is good, because I don't like stories that are told in the present tense, just as a general rule. Can be done well, obviously. I just think generally it's easier to write in the past tense, and because creepypasta writers are often amateurs, it makes sense to go with past tense, but they don't. But this story, the protagonist often acts in and talks and describes in ways as though he only has information that he would have gathered if he was talking in the first tense, in the present tense rather. And so, because he's talking in the past tense, he should have all the information that he's gathered throughout the story. But there are a couple of moments in the story. I think a particular point that I highlighted, he says in one of the opening paragraphs, "If my memory serves, he wore black shoes." What he should have said was, "If my memory served me correctly." And the reason that's just not any old tense swap is because it's sort of indicative of the story, in that he talks as though he's only got information that he would have if he was speaking in the present tense, but of course he's speaking in the past tense. The second issue that I've noted, and I did notice this on my first reading, but I chalked it up to just me needing to suspend my disbelief more. Something I took issue with originally was that it's never explained how Stubbs can do all of this crazy paranormal stuff. And sure, you can just say, well, it's paranormal, it doesn't need an explanation, and sometimes not explaining things is actually better than explaining them. The problem with this is that it kind of warrants an explanation, because the protagonist said that he watched the show when he was a child, and none of this paranormal stuff was happening. He remembers it as a regular TV show. And if this show is so old, and it's basically like a snuff film, why wasn't it reported to the police? Why couldn't any of the people who worked on it be identified? And that's another issue with stories like these in general, but this story in particular, is that this show would have needed a crew of people to be made, meaning they would all need to find people who were just A-okay with, like, you know, mutilating people. That's a bit weird. It doesn't really explain what parts of the show were, you know, evil and, you know, the creepy bit, and what parts of the original show were just a normal run-of-the-mill low-budget TV show. Those are both things that are very necessary to explain, because otherwise the story just doesn't really make very much sense.
So, that was Stubb's Clubhouse, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, and this is Media Review Mike, signing out.